You've heard that China is the oldest empire on earth. One unbroken line. One eternal civilization that never fell. That story is a myth. The truth is the opposite, and it's far more astonishing. This empire didn't survive for 2,000 years. It died. Over and over. A dozen times it collapsed in fire and rebellion, and a dozen times it clawed its way back from the grave. And here's the part I can't get past. Most things that break stay broken. This empire did the opposite. It turned dying and clawing its way back into its whole way of being. So how do you outlast Rome and Egypt by dying again and again? The answer is a single, ruthless idea. The Chinese called it the mandate of heaven. Picture a contract written by the sky itself. Heaven blesses a just ruler. The moment that ruler turns cruel, heaven yanks the blessing away. And here's the deadly twist. If a rebel wins, that victory was the proof. Heaven had already switched sides, so every successful uprising became holy. Every new emperor was heaven's new choice. That one idea is the engine that drove the rise and fall of Imperial China again and again for over 2,000 years. It begins with one of the most terrifying men who ever lived. Around 221 BC, after centuries of warring states tearing each other apart, a single king conquered them all. His name was Yin Zheng, and he wanted a title no one had ever held. So he invented one, emperor. He called himself Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor. And the word he coined for emperor would be spoken by Chinese rulers for the next 2,000 years. But unifying the map wasn't enough for him. He unified everything. He forced every region to use the same written script, the same round coins, the same weights and measures. He even standardized the width of cart axles, so every wagon fit every road in the empire. Imagine erasing every local difference in a land that vast by decree. And he was brutal about it. The Qin ruled by a cold philosophy called legalism, harsh laws, collective punishment, total control. By the traditional account, the regime burned books it disliked and buried hundreds of scholars alive. Knowledge itself was a threat to the state. To wall out the horsemen of the northern steppe, he linked older frontier walls into a first Great Wall. And for his own death, he built an army. Deep near modern Xi'an, archaeologists later uncovered the Terracotta Army. By some accounts, several thousand life-size clay soldiers, each with its own face, standing guard over an emperor's tomb for eternity. Ancient texts claim hundreds of thousands of laborers built it. So here's the question. A man this powerful, an empire this total, how long do you think it lasted? Roughly 15 years. That's it. The first emperor died, and the whole machine shattered in revolt almost immediately. The very harshness that built the empire is what destroyed it. By the logic of the mandate, heaven had spoken. And out of the wreckage rose a commoner named Liu Bang, who won the war and founded a dynasty that would become legend. The Han. The Han is China's first golden age. It glowed so brightly that even today, the majority ethnic group in China calls itself the Han people, named after this very dynasty. Under Emperor Wu, a thinker named Confucius became the state's official guide. His ideas about order, family, and duty would shape Chinese government for 2,000 years. And the Han reached outward. A diplomat named Zhang Tian rode west into the unknown, and his journeys cracked open the Silk Road. Suddenly, Chinese silk was flowing all the way to Rome, and Rome's gold was flowing back. Two great empires, on opposite ends of the earth, trading without ever truly meeting. Then came an invention that changed the human mind itself. A court official named Kai Lun is credited with refining cheap paper made from bark, hemp, and old rags. Now ideas could be written down for almost nothing and spread. Paper would eventually travel the whole world. But the Han's greatest creation was quieter. They began choosing officials by merit. Recommend the man, then test him. It was the seed of an idea that would outlive every dynasty to come. And then, after 4 centuries, even the mighty Han rotted, collapsed, and fell. China shattered into pieces for roughly 400 years. Now, here's the part nobody tells you about Chinese history. We talk about it as one smooth story. It wasn't. Between the golden ages were long, bloody centuries of chaos, where the empire simply did not exist. China spent enormous stretches of its life broken into warring kingdoms. The miracle isn't that it lasted. The miracle is that it kept choosing to reassemble itself every single time from the rubble. And reassemble it did. A dynasty called the Sui stitched the country back together. They dug the Grand Canal, a colossal artificial river linking the Yellow River in the north to the Yangtze in the south. It tied the rice-rich south to the political north, and it was built by armies of conscripted laborers at a horrifying human cost. That overreach, plus disastrous wars, burned the Sui out in just a few decades. But the canal remained. And on that foundation rose one of the most dazzling empires in human history, the Tang. The Tang was cosmopolitan, confident, and open to the world. Its capital, Chang'an, swelled to roughly 1 million people inside the walls, making it likely the largest city on earth. Walk its streets, and you'd pass merchants from Persia, envoys from Korea and Japan, and temples of half a dozen faiths standing side by side. It was the great age of Chinese poetry, with masters like Li Bai and Du Fu. And the Tang did something no other dynasty ever did. For 15 years, it was ruled by a woman who held the actual title of emperor. Her name was Wu Zetian. She seized supreme power, founded her own dynasty, and ruled in her own right, the only female emperor in the entire history of China. Then, a devastating rebellion gutted the Tang. Regional warlords carved up its power, and by 907 this golden age, too, was gone. But watch what China loses and what it keeps. Dynasties die. The civilization underneath them does not. Because the next empire would be the most inventive of them all. The Song dynasty was a medieval explosion of technology and money. 3 of China's 4 great inventions matured or spread here. Gunpowder, with its first written formulas appearing around the year 1044. The magnetic compass, which let ships find their way across open sea. And printing, including movable type, centuries before Europe. The Song even issued the world's first government paper money, real banknotes, while Europe was still counting coins. This was a society centuries ahead of the rest of the world. And then, from the grasslands of the north came a storm it could not survive. If those horsemen sound familiar, they should. Because the conquerors were the same Mongols we followed last time. The grandson of Genghis Khan, a warlord named Kublai Khan, set his eyes on all of China. He proclaimed a new dynasty, the Yuan, and by 1279 he had crushed the last Song resistance. And here is the moment that broke 1,000 years of pride. For the first time ever, the whole of China was ruled by a foreign people. Outsiders sat on the dragon throne. The conquering Mongols ruled from a city they called Khanbalik. Today we call that city Beijing. And it was here, by his own account, that a Venetian traveler named Marco Polo reportedly visited the great Khan's court. But the mandate is a cruel master, even to conquerors. Famine, plague, and rebellion broke Mongol rule in under a century. And the man who drove them out was as low-born as it gets. A starving peasant who became a wandering monk, then a rebel general, then an emperor. His name was Zhu Yuanzhang, and his Ming dynasty was a proud restoration of native Han rule. The Ming built the China of postcards. The Forbidden City in Beijing, an entire palace city raised by hundreds of thousands of workers, became the emperor's home for the rest of the empire's life. And the Great Wall you picture in your mind, that magnificent stone serpent across the mountains, is mostly a Ming creation. The wall they rebuilt in brick is far younger than the first emperor's original. And for one brief, breathtaking window, the Ming looked outward. A Muslim admiral named Zheng He commanded enormous treasure fleets that sailed across the Indian Ocean. By some accounts, these were among the largest wooden ships ever built. They reached Southeast Asia, India, Arabia, and the coast of East Africa decades before Columbus crossed the Atlantic. China was poised to discover the world. And then it simply stopped. The voyages were abruptly cancelled. The great fleets were left to rot. The Ming turned its back on the sea and looked inward, behind its new walls. It's one of history's great what-ifs. What if China had kept sailing? Instead, the mandate turned one final time. In 1644, rebels stormed Beijing. The last Ming emperor died, and a new northern people, the Manchus, swept in to seize the throne. Their dynasty was the Qing. And once again, a foreign minority ruled the vast Chinese majority. At first, the Qing soared. Under a run of brilliant emperors, the empire reached its greatest size ever, and its population would eventually pass 400 million people. It was the largest empire China had ever been. The peak before the long fall. Because this time, the danger didn't come from the steppe. It came by sea, from an industrial Europe the old empire could not comprehend. Britain wanted to sell opium into China. When the Qing said no, Britain went to war and won easily. The first Opium War forced a humiliating treaty on China. Then a second war forced more. The proud empire was being carved up by foreigners and there was little it could do. The Chinese remembered this era by a bitter name, the century of humiliation. And from within, it bled too. A vast civil war called the Taiping Rebellion tore through the country, killing, by some estimates, 20 to 30 million people. One of the deadliest conflicts in all of human history. The empire was dying its final death. In 1905, the Qing abolished the imperial exam system, that meritocratic road to power, after roughly 1300 years. The oldest institution of Chinese government was gone, and the end, when it came, was strangely quiet. The last emperor of China was a little boy named Puyi. He took the throne at under 3 years old, a toddler in a robe in the Forbidden City, ruling over a fifth of humanity. In 1912, a revolution swept the dynasty away, and on a cold February day, the child emperor abdicated. With one signature, over 2,000 years of imperial rule came to an end. Puyi would live on as a puppet, a prisoner, and finally as an ordinary citizen who died, decades later, working in a garden. So look at the whole impossible arc. Qin to Han, Tang to Song, Yuan to Ming to Qing. Each dynasty rose, glittered, rotted, and fell, and each time the same civilization rebuilt itself on the ashes. And now you can see why the meat gets it so wrong, and why the truth is so much greater. China was never one unbroken, eternal empire. It was something stranger. It was an empire that kept dying and refused to stay dead. Think back. Rome fell once, and stayed fallen forever. Egypt was finally swallowed whole by outsiders and never ruled itself again. But China, broken a dozen times, conquered, humiliated, shattered, always pulled itself back into the same civilization. And along the way, it handed the world paper, printing, gunpowder, and the compass, the very tools that would remake everyone else. And here's what stays with me. We are taught that surviving means never falling. China spent 2,000 years proving the exact opposite. Maybe that's the real secret of Imperial China. It wasn't built to never fall. It was built to be reborn. We've now watched 3 of history's giants. The one that fell once, the one that was swallowed, and the one that simply would not die. Next time, we follow another empire that thought it would last forever. If you want to know which one, stay with me.